right, welcome. How is it going, guys? Thank you for tuning in. This is VR Revelations. Welcome. So it is the year of our Lord, 2024, August 8th, and I'm making a follow-up video here on the situation in the Kursk region of Russia, wherein Ukraine launched an attack across the border into Russian territory there in the Kursk region. And it looks like they pretty much caught Russia by surprise. I don't think anybody was expecting Ukraine to launch an attack here to the northeast when the front lines are obviously all over here in the west area of Ukraine. But as I mentioned in the previous video, I was covering the attack because, you know, it was of a considerable size. They had, I think in that last video, I covered a report saying it was like 10 tanks and multiple armored vehicles, reports of over 1,000 men. So it was a considerable, size for this operation. But I hadn't realized that they were trying to sort of use blitzkrieg tactics and actually advance deep into Russian territory, which is pretty outstanding, seeing that, you know, they are in major need of, successes in the western side of Ukraine where, the front lines are. So it's just, it's really a risky move to launch an operation of this size into Russian territory, opening up the door for Russia to sort of escalate the conflict, seeing this sort of major attack into Russia. And so I was looking at reports today following up on this, and it looks like they've actually made some advances in that region. Now, the region we're talking about is right up here to the northwest, as we can see here. And, they've made some advances, and it looks like, according to reports, they've actually have been skirting the Russia's defenses and sort of overextending themselves. Now, of course, this can be dangerous because as you're moving forward, you really don't have control of the territory that you're advancing on, right? Not if you haven't cleared out the defensive lines and you're just rushing past them. So it begs the question, what exactly is the strategy here? Is it to sort of, encircle those forces that they are running past? I just don't think they have the manpower to carry out an operation of the like. So right after that, I then thought, well, we know that, they want to show some successes, especially with the US elections coming up, especially with the sort of disenchantment with Zelensky and with Ukraine as a whole, with everything taking place in Israel, right? All the attention, all the support of the US is sort of focused on Israel, at least on, national TV, because they are still sending, weapons and money to Ukraine. And this is a bigger deal than the situation in Israel, right? Again, if and when Ukraine loses this war, it's going to be a major embarrassment to the U.S., right? I don't think, we've seen anything like this since possibly the Vietnam War, which was a major embarrassment to the United States, but this is even bigger. The stakes are higher. Pretty much the world has changed. The sanctions against Russia, the way they literally tossed the kitchen sink at Russia, and everything has backfired. So, this is a way bigger deal, but it's not getting the national attention as it was, like last year or at the beginning of the conflict when Russia decided to move into, the western area of Ukraine there, since the U.S. was trying to get Ukraine to join NATO and establish their military right on Russia's doorsteps. But so I was thinking, like, why are they in such a hurry? Why are they launching this sort of blitzkrieg? And it became sort of obvious that they're trying to show the West that they're winning the war, that they're getting close to Moscow. Now look at this. Moscow is right up here to the north of the Kursk region. So not only to the average knucklehead who eats up all of the Western propaganda, they're going to see this on the news saying Ukraine has now launched an attack into Russian territory. They're advancing quickly. They're kilometers or miles away from the capital, right? That would make you think, oh my gosh, like, wow, Ukraine is winning the war, when of course they are not. But I think that was the whole purpose of this attack, is to sort of launch this major attack that probably won't be successful, but because of the size, because of the resources that they are spending in this operation here, that's sort of in the vicinity of the capital of Russia and, in Russia's territory, it might take a while for Russia to expel the forces from that region. But again, the headlines in the Western media are going to be Ukraine launches attack across border, close to Russia's capital, right? And so if they can keep this going up until the elections, they're going to fool people into thinking that they are actually winning the conflict. Now, it does seem that, Russia was caught off guard. I think pretty much, the spectators such as you and I obviously couldn't have known that this was going to take place, especially since Ukrainian forces are running thin and, they're losing the war in the front lines there in the west of Ukraine. But you would think, that Russia's intelligence would have caught on to this and would have been prepared. Now, they're not necessarily not prepared. Again, Russia has sent forces there. There's reports that the Wagner group has been sent to the area. But again, it seems like the goal of the Ukrainians is to advance and to cover as much territory as they can in this region in order to make headlines and sort of trick people into thinking that, this is that Ukraine is turning the tides, right? Especially now with the arrival of these F-16 planes. Now, when we look at it from Russia's perspective, this is quite alarming if you're a citizen of Russia. You understand that, Russia is winning the war, but at the same time, they are probably asking themselves, how is it possible that Ukrainian forces are actually in Russian territory now and, not super far away from the capital? Like, this is really worrying. Of course, it's reminiscent of, World War II with Nazi Germany launching, their blitzkrieg attacks towards these cities, especially these strategic cities like Moscow, right? And so, of course, that's going to activate the memories of the populace. And at the same time, this is an escalation because we really hadn't seen an operation, of this size into Russian territory, right? And the fact that they've now crossed the border and they're trying to, make a strong push further in, it's just going to provoke Russia into doing the same, into being more aggressive and, pushing deeper into Ukrainian territory. And so, this is being covered here by pretty much every Western media outlet right now. So I do want to show you this article from the Washington Post. It says Ukraine, powered by Western arms, stuns Russia in cross-border assault. So You can see here, the Washington Post not being vague about, the fact that Ukraine is being powered by the weapons that the United States and its allies are sending. So I'll just read a little bit from here, and then I'll jump over to an article from War News 24/7. But it says, Ukrainian troops battled for a third day Thursday in Russia's Kursk region, occupying villages and part of a town in what has become the Western-backed military's largest cross-border incursion since the Kremlin's invasion in 2022. So this is pretty big. And it's developing right now, right? US, Ukrainian, and Russian officials all acknowledged the ongoing attack, which stunned Moscow and appeared to involve the use of armored fighting vehicles donated to Kyiv by the United States and its European partners, a development that drew no immediate objection from the Biden administration, despite its past restrictions on such use of American weaponry. So it seems like this attack came out of the blue, but it's, I don't think it's a coincidence that this sort of coincides with the arrival of these F-16s. I think, Ukraine sort of felt like they needed to do something, right? So they looked at the front lines and they probably said, hey, we can't do anything there. We need something to show the West in order to garner more support, because this war is at a critical point. And so I think they thought, hey, why not launch an attack in the northwestern area into the Kursk region here. Will send a lot of forces, catch the Russians by surprise, since a lot of their forces are focused on the front lines, and we can also deploy this fast-paced attack, this sort of blitzkrieg tactic, and at the same time, in that area we're close sort of to the capital, so this will look great on national news. And, this will show people that we're winning the war, that we're threatening Russia at its capital, right at the head of government. So now, of course, if for anybody that's actually been keeping up, that is honest about, the size and capabilities of these militaries, one would understand that, this really doesn't impact the whole war itself, right? This is more of a symbolic move here. It's not like, they actually have the ability or capability to win this war just because they crossed the border. Again, Ukraine cannot win this war because Russia is a nuclear superpower, right? If Russia really wanted to, and think about it, right? They could, because now they've been invaded themselves into their territory, and particularly in a region close to the capital. So if they really wanted to, they could use a tactical nuke in that area and completely annihilate the thousands of soldiers there, right? And again, as I've said, if Russia were to use nuclear weapons there, the U.S. is not going to be willing to risk mutually assured destruction over Ukraine, right? But this is more of a symbolic show, and it definitely is very symbolic indeed, and I think it will have the desired effect for a short while. I think the strategy by Ukraine here is to keep this going, if possible, until the November elections in the United States. But we'll have to see how Russia responds. Again, Putin has actually been very level-headed, very cool-headed, in his approach to this special military operation, as they've called it, especially with so many media voices in Russia literally calling for nuclear strikes on Ukraine and even Ukraine supporters, right? So there's definitely going to be a lot of pressure by these media personalities in Russia, possibly by the populace, to escalate this to a higher level, to possibly use those bigger weapons that Russia has. Now that this is going to bring up World War II memories, and it's definitely going to sort of shock the populace as to how, if Russia is winning, could they have allowed this type of incursion there, especially not too far from Moscow. So this was definitely a short-term, propaganda, a good propaganda short-term move by Ukraine. Again, I think it's going to backfire, especially with these tactics where they're trying to run past the defenses. But we'll see how long they can hold, and we'll see how tough Russia actually responds. So we see there that the Western media outlets are aware of the situation, and they're sort of paying more attention to this, because I think they're actually surprised as well. Let's actually read this article that goes more into detail into the situation right now. This is from War News 24/7. It says, the crisis in Kursk deepens. The Ukrainians advance towards the E-38 highway and create two lines of defenses. The Russians respond with carpet bombing. The security crisis in Kursk is growing as Ukrainian troops continue to advance despite their losses. So again, even though they are suffering major losses because of this rushed advance, they still continue to throw men at the area, and they're trying to run past the defenses. So they're sort of trying to gain as much ground as they can. Not really thinking about the long term, right? Which shows you that they're sort of just trying to cover ground so they can make the headlines pretty much. Ukraine placed under control 27 settlements in the Kursk region, with the depth of the Ukrainian invasion reaching in some places as much as 30 kilometers. The Ukrainian invasion force is now trying something that seemed impossible: to take control of the E-38 highway that passes through the key city of Elgov. So I'm not sure if we can see that on the map here. Let me see if I zoom in. Hold on, let's go down here. So this is going to be this is the live view A map. Now this purple area, according to the map, is what the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian presence currently what they have under control. And so I think this is the highway here. As you can see here, it says 38K, and I believe that's what the article mentioned there. So I guess they're trying to take control of this highway here. I don't think it's this one over here. Well, it could be. I'm not quite sure, but I think that's the one. I think it's going to be this one here. But anyways, let's go back to the article. It says, as far as reaction forces are concerned, Russia has until now mobilized only some units from the northern force. Ukrainian analysts believe that Moscow will mobilize reserves from Moscow, Voronezh, Rostov regions. There are no signs yet that he is withdrawing forces from Donbass. However, the absence of a quick reaction shows that Russian forces and the Russian generals were caught sleeping. Russia failed to identify the Ukrainian attack, failed to interpret the gathering of Ukrainian forces in Sumy as an offensive maneuver. They probably thought it was a diversion in order to, or a decoy, right, from Ukraine. They probably, again, why would Ukraine stop focusing on the front lines and carry out an attack in that region? So they probably thought it was just a tactic to fool them for a while or something. I'm sure they were aware of the buildup of forces there. So it says, we have this tweet here from this Twitter account. According to Russian sources, Ukrainian forces have penetrated roughly 30 kilometers into Russia's Kursk Oblast on 2 routes of advance. Ukrainian troops successfully maneuvered around Russian positions and reportedly reached the towns of Bolsheye, Zoltanotske, and Ivnitsa. We have this, this pro-Ukrainian, Twitter account here. It says Ukraine has liberated 27 settlements in the Kursk region of Russia and expanded their gains to 430 square kilometers. Some are reported to be around 25 kilometers to 30 kilometers inside of Russia. Ukraine is using the lack of defense and geography to advance. The situation in Kursk. Rybar admits that the crisis is deepening in the Kursk region. He characteristically mentions that despite the efforts of the Russian forces to stop the advance of the Ukrainian groups, the scale of the crisis is growing. Unfortunately, the tactics of the Ukrainian forces, with an emphasis on rapid penetrations, the bypassing of fortified areas, and the maximum expansion of the disengagement zone without consolidation, in the first stage, it exceeds the counterattack capabilities of the Russian army. So Ukraine is pretty much literally going blitzkrieg tactics. They're blasting into this territory, which again, it didn't work for Hitler, who led the biggest invasion force the world has ever seen into Russia, and they got close to Moscow, just like Napoleon did. Actually, I think Napoleon did get to Moscow, but Hitler was close, but they just couldn't defeat the Russians. So the blitzkrieg, it's not going to work on the Russians, especially not with the army that's left for Ukraine. In the Sunja region, the control zone of the Ukrainian formations was extended to 30 kilometers along the Diakonov-Sunja road. Points of resistance of the Russian army are cut off and bypassed after capturing Kazashia, Lognia in the north, and Mirny and Bodorivka settlements in the south. Ukrainian soldiers entered Matinovka. Then they also occupied the settlement of Kruklik. At the same time, a group of Ukrainians moved further along the highway, reaching Bolshayov, Zoltanotskoye. There are reports of fighting taking place along the highway. Heavy fighting is also taking place in the surrounding settlements, 15 kilometers south of Elgov. In the Koronevsky district, the Ukrainians are trying to capture the administrative center. Fighting is taking place at the entrance to Koronov, while Ukrainian units are trying to capture the settlements of Olgovka and Kremeny. So we can see the map here of the area that the Ukrainians have taken control of and where they're looking to launch their attacks, what they're looking to focus. Heavy shelling against Ukrainian forces. The Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the Ukrainian incursion into the Russian Kursk region is a big challenge. The Kyiv regime has launched another major provocation, Putin told members of the Russian government about the Kursk attack, then added that Ukrainian forces had carried out indiscriminate shelling of civilian targets in Russian territory. Airstrikes, missile forces, artillery fire, and actions of units covering the state borders prevented the enemy from advancing deep into the territory of the Russian Federation. The battle will be fierce, said Yuri Podolyaka, an influential Ukrainian-born pro-Russian military blogger. It's definitely not going to end anytime soon, even if the enemy fails to make progress. And no one can guarantee that at this point there will be artillery strikes and drone strikes, and in large numbers, said Podolyaka. So it sounds like Ukraine is definitely going all in into this attack here into Russian territory in the region. By the sounds of it, if it's not going to end anytime soon, that means, they're sending a lot of troops there. Again, they sort of blitzkrieged into the area, so if they can establish control there and take out the defenses they ran past, they definitely could hold until the elections in the United States and have something to show for as that those important dates arrive in the U.S., right? So we have some video here from this Twitter account, Aiden. It says, another pause column of Ukrainian armor and vehicle cover with cluster munitions in the Kursk region. So let's take a quick look at that. All right, so you can definitely see the armored Ukrainian vehicles right there, like along the tree line, and you can see these cluster munitions that are being dropped on them there. So, yeah, heavy Ukrainian losses. According to the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, during the day, border defense units, in coordination with border guards, reinforcement units, and incoming reserves, successfully prevented enemy advances through airstrike, missile forces, and artillery fire. Russian forces struck, detected concentrations of fighters and equipment, thwarting attempts by individual units to penetrate deeper into the Kursk region. In addition, airstrikes were carried out against Ukrainian reserves in the Sumy region. Since the start of the hostilities in the Kursk region, Kyiv has reportedly lost 660 soldiers and 82 armored vehicles, including 8 tanks, 12 armored personnel carriers, 6 infantry fighting vehicles, 55 armored fighting vehicles, and 1 engineer vehicle. In the last 24 hours alone, the Ukrainians lost up to 400 personnel and 32 armored vehicles, including 1 tank, 4 armored personnel carriers, 3 infantry fighting vehicles, and 24 Cossack armored fighting vehicles. Now, you don't aim at the heart of Russia without expecting major casualties. Essentially, there's already, the Ukrainian populace are already fighting, all of these recruiters, all of these, guys trying to force them into the war, right? Trying to send them to the front lines. And so pretty much this was a suicide mission, right? I'm assuming, these soldiers knew that Russia will have zero tolerance for this type of incursion into their territory, especially in a direction that's being aimed at the capital, right? This is absolutely going to infuriate the populace. And again, more pressure is going to grow on Putin to, notch this, turn the fire up on this thing, because they're getting too close for comfort. Even if, they understand that the win will be inevitable for Russia. Of course, the populace is not going to like the fact that, they're seeing this news about this incursion into the Kursk region, not too far away from Moscow. So, again, this is pretty crazy that, at this point in the war, when they're losing in the front lines, they actually decide to sort of anger Russia even more by launching this attack, close to, in the direction of the capital, right? And again, it's more symbolic than actually, like a good strategic move, right? So I think they're probably going to try and hold as long as they can. But I think Russia is definitely going to deploy forces there. Again, there's reports that they've called up the Wagner group to fight here, and we know what happened in Bakhmut, right? Which was an impenetrable fortress, right? And the Ukrainian army is already demoralized. I'm sure all of these soldiers here know that this is a suicide mission, so that's definitely not going to help with the morale there. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye out here and see how Russia responds to this. But immediately, this reminded me of World War II blitzkrieg, trying to rush to the capital in a sort of desperate move. But I did want to show you guys a tweet, or rather, not a tweet, but a Telegram post by Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, who, of course, he's pretty much like the right-hand man of Putin, or not right-hand man, but he's pretty up there. He was a former president, even though Putin was in control. But this guy is way more drastic in his calls for attacks on Ukraine. He's literally way more way more harsh in his opinion, or on the way he thinks that Russia should be reacting than how Putin is actually handling the war. But I did want to show you what he posted here on Telegram, because it's exactly what I expected, right, that he would say. So he says, causes and goals of terrorism. The operations of the Ukrainian Nazis in the Kursk region have already been reflected in detail and objectively in the analytics. This is both a desire to profitably show off the remnants of their dwindling forces to their masters in order to obtain a new portion of money and weapons, right? So he's essentially saying this is a desperate attempt by Ukraine to show the U.S., to show the West, that, hey, look, we went into Russia, and it's looking good, so, we're going to need more support. But when in reality, they know they're losing the war, and this is just a desperate attempt to garner more support. So he goes on here, and an attempt to thin out our combat formations on the main line of confrontation, drawing off some of the forces to Kursk and Belgorod, and a temporary informational transformation of betrayal into victory. It is necessary to learn a serious lesson from what happened and fulfill what Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov promised the Supreme Commander-in-Chief to mercilessly defeat and destroy the enemy. There is another important political and legal consequence of what happened. From now on, the SVO must acquire an openly extraterritorial character. So he's saying, because Ukraine now decided to go into Russian territory, we now must change our position of just trying to, not go too deep into Ukraine and just sort of, take back the lands according to our objectives, for this special military operation, and we have to repay them in kind now, right? We can't allow this to happen, so now we should be looking to push further into Ukraine. And he specifies that here. So he says, this is no longer just an operation to return our official territories and punish the Nazis. We can and must go to the lands of the still existing Ukraine, to Odessa, to Kharkov, to Dnepropetrovsk, to Nikolaev, to Kiev, and further. There should be no restrictions in the sense of some borders of the Ukrainian Reich recognized by someone. And now we can and must talk about this openly, without embarrassment and diplomatic courtesies. The terrorist operation of the Banderites must remove any taboos from this topic. Let everyone, including the English bastards, realize this. We will stop only when we consider it acceptable and beneficial for ourselves. Blessed memory to the dead, military and civilians, all who came under heavy fire from neo-Nazis. The best memory of them is a carefully thought out retribution. Recovery to all the wounded. So Now, again, this isn't Putin saying this, but this sort of shows you the sentiment behind the scenes, and I'm sure the Russians are definitely going to be calling for a more harsh approach into to this conflict, to not hold back as much, and to push into Ukraine now that Ukraine has deemed it convenient to push into Russian territory. Even after the West had warned about this, right? Had warned Ukraine about not doing this. Now they've sent these F-16s, these weapons, and they're supporting this. And Russia is definitely going to take this very seriously. And I think this has sort of, it's going to have the effect that Ukraine wants, right? To show the West, hey, look, we're in Russia. We're inside of Russia now. We're going after the capital. But at the same time, I think it's going to backfire because Russia's going to use that, as Dmitry Medvedev said here, to now tell its citizens, hey, look, yes, this was a special military operation, but they just invaded Russia, so we have to go all the way, right? All the way to the capital. The West has been warning about Russia trying to take all of Kyiv. Well, now they've sort of pushed Russia into doing that, right? So, but at the end of the day, the last word is with Putin, who has been very reserved of this, very wary, very careful in carrying out this operation because, he seems to be the only one that is really aware of what a nuclear war actually means for the world. But anyways, I'll keep an eye out on this, guys. Pretty long video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. God bless you all, and have a great day.